Mark Selby, CEO of Canada Nickel, advancing the Crawford nickel sulfide project, which will become the Western world's largest nickel sulfide operation, and unlocking the Timmins Nickel District, which we expect to be the world's largest nickel sulfide endowment.
Welcome to London, sir.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, I know. I know you've been next door. It's busy. But
Yeah.
I was at an investor presentation yesterday in London, and I was very popular. Yeah, it's the first time.
You're always very popular.
Do you know why? Because people were rushing to me and saying, we're invested in Canada Nickel.
Okay.
Should we be? Mm-hmm. And then listen to me for 5 minutes pontificate. But yeah, big support base here in London, so I can sort of see why you come to these conferences.
Yes. Yeah. We've got quite a big European base, both in the UK and in Germany, so it makes sense to get over here a couple times a year.
Fantastic. Yeah. Right, the purpose of this update, existing shareholders, access new shareholders. Yep. Are people leaning into the nickel thematic?
Yeah, so the good piece is because the news narrative through the first half of the year was just so negative, that has basically inspired some contrarians to really start looking at the story. And again, not only just investors, but again, some of the big PE funds, are really starting to look at the nickel space and think it's been oversold. Again, I think the realization that, it's not just about EVs, nickel and cobalt in terms of critical minerals. Critical metals are really a national security issue for both the U.S. and Europe. Yeah. And obviously with Trump getting elected last week, I
missed that.
Yeah, there's good. I haven't seen it anywhere in the news. Yeah. The whole tariffs on China and the fact that China produces most of these critical minerals just means those of us who are going to be inside the fence are going to benefit from whatever tariffs end up being placed on Chinese production. So.
It sounds interesting. I was talking to another nickel company last week. Their project's in Africa.
Yep.
But they have great expectations, great hopes off the back of the nickel, the Trump's victory and what that can mean in terms of that critical mineral security. What does that look like? We've seen a lot of conversation over the past couple of years from Biden administration. Yep. He's made some big moves, I think, in his last push before he leaves on nuclear. Yeah. But how are things going to change under Trump?
Yeah, I think, in terms of we'll end up at the same goal, just a different path than where Biden and crew are going. So, with Biden, you had the Inflation Reduction Act, and then as part of that, you had the Foreign Entities of Concern rules. So it was kind of a carrot. If you are able to source material, your vehicles will qualify for a subsidy in terms of electric vehicles. Yeah. I think Trump will be. We're just going to put a tariff on it from any country we don't like. And China's the top of that list. The new national security advisor, China, he is a 100% China hawk. So don't think that they're going to kind of go easy or halfway on China based on the cabinet appointments they've been making in the last week. Trump's going full Trump in terms of that. So that is going to mean, a lot of tariffs on Chinese produced goods. So again, for us, whether Biden won or Trump won, being inside the fence, just means that we're going to be in terms of pricing. Well, we'll see that reflected in pricing. Again, North American prices are already higher across a range of commodities. That price gap versus the rest of the world is going to increase. In terms of funding support, the one place where they were both the Republicans and Democrats were 100% aligned was on support for critical minerals. Right. And so, all of the same funding programs you're going to see for the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, those will all stay in place. I wouldn't be surprised to see even more funding come through the Defense Department, because again, Trump is really does see this as a war against China. And so, again, we'll see that kind of funding support. There's been ideas floated, and again, in a Trump world, about buying commodities at a fixed price, to ensure that those projects get built. Yeah. I've been in those conversations that have happened with various U.S. government groups, and so again, don't expect to see those slow down. And again, I think the thing for investors, not just Canada Nickel or nickel, look at critical minerals opportunities in friendly countries, because governments want those built, and they're going to continue to pull out all the stops to make it possible for those projects to get developed.
Frank, what's the knock-on effect for equities, in the sense that if you kind of get a government saying, well, we can do some fixed price contracting with you, or whatever the structure of that looks like, what's the knock-on effect for equities?
Yeah, so twofold. One, in terms of, if they're providing a big chunk of the capital stack, right? And last time we give a Canada Nickel update, we had just gotten the $500 million US commitment and the $500 million, letter of support. And so, most of our debt package is going to come from government agencies, globally. The Canadian government's going to give us $600 million US of refundable tax credits, which we're working towards getting a bridge facility in place to be able to use those. So we're really just solving for $300 million of capital for a $2 billion US project. And we expect that to come from other project partners. So in terms of the equity impact, that's there. So it provides capital that the public markets don't otherwise have to do. And then the other part, in terms of getting the cost of the financing for the rest of it, which again has to come out of the cash flow from the business when the mine's built. Again, if they're willing to provide, low interest loans, loan guarantees, other kinds of financing support, if they're going to provide a price floor, that makes it far easier for banks to lend a lot more aggressively, knowing that there's a fixed price, offtake on the other side. And so by providing capital and then reducing the cost of the other capital that's got to come in, we benefit from both ways. And I think once investors figure it out, and once governments actually make that happen for a few more projects, we've seen Lithium Americas get sort of fully financed down that path. I think once a few more projects, people can see the recipe and how it actually turns out, then all of a sudden I think you're going to see a massive re-rate. People go, oh, okay, this is actually for real.
Right. And what is the knock on? We'll get to the company stuff. It's fascinating, actually, really insightful. What does this do for things like shorting in the space? If you've got governments saying we want to back this stuff, and they're saying to banks, we want to bank this stuff, right? We want you to bank this stuff. In terms of that kind of whole shorting thing, which is going on at the moment, there's a kind of the junior market is a little bit broken in that sense, right? Does this correct that for companies with strong fundamentals, or does it correct the whole market potentially?
It starts with strong fundamentals. It will. So the challenge, the only way to beat the shorts, the way things are structured in Canada right now, and it's again, it's $1 billion robbery that's happening in plain sight. The only way that stops is when the sector becomes in favor, and they can't just broadly short the sector and not worry, and only have to worry about maybe one or two companies getting over the line. Once a bunch of companies in a sector starts to become more broadly in favor, then it's harder for them to play their games. So again, they'll focus on the fundamental names first, but once enough, they'll continue to focus on the weaker group. But once enough market cap is covered off in the strong group, so they can't short the sector broadly, then they'll pull out entirely, and then the smaller cap should finally get some lift.
That'll be amazing to see how that dynamic works, because you can't have the government saying we support this, and then have people, who they work with, the banks, go, oh, but we're still going to try and cripple them over here. That's not a good look.
No, and we've made it very, like in my conversations with government, one of the first things I talk about is the shorting issue. Again, because I get asked, how can we help your project? How can we help critical minerals projects move forward? Yes, so you have to, number one is to fix the shorting issue. So there's listening. So, Terry and crew with Save Canadian Mining have done a great job. And if enough of us keep talking about it, it does seem to be getting some traction now. So fingers crossed.
Fantastic. Let's talk about Crawford, okay? Yeah. So I think the bulk of the questions I got yesterday were around, we doubted the ability to actually fund this thing because it was $1 billion, it's $2 billion, whatever number people put on this thing is. It's really been critical for you to kind of show that Crawford gets funded, but stacked up behind that is a whole bunch of looky-likeys, step, repeat, cookie cutter, however you want to phrase it, companies. So but you've got to prove you can do one, then we're going to believe that all of a sudden the multiple game applies here.
Yes.
So remind people what you've done up to date in terms of the kind of that financing stack.
Yeah. So it's just under $2 billion capex. To do that as a non-cash flow company, you have to raise $2.5 billion US, $1.5 billion debt, $1 billion equity. We had the two announcements last time we talked. So Export Development Canada is there for $500 million US and agreed to be a mandated lead arranger on a debt facility. Another institution's there for 500 million Canadian. Again, it's still have to go through some DD, but that's literally 60% of the debt package there. But the more important part is having EDC in as a lead arranger. They're seen as the leader in the mining space, and so with the money we're spending in other jurisdictions, whether it's the U.S., Europe, with a Korean partner, we'll be able to get the balance of that funding from export credit agencies with a small sliver of private banks. And again, there's a half a dozen banks
Right.
that are active in this space,
Okay.
and they've been actively approaching us in terms of being a part of that facility. So we have visibility pretty much on on that. We still have to go through some due diligence, but we've got visibility on that debt package and how it can come together. On the equity side, it's going to be $1 billion. We have 600. We qualify because of federal government programs for critical minerals tax credit, carbon capture and storage tax credit. That's over $600 million US for the first phase of the project. We're talking to groups about bridging that facility so we can use it as equity capital. Samsung is there for 100, so we're just solving for $300 million.
Right.
And those discussions with other people in the battery supply chain, and also in the private equity groups, are going. Obviously, with the election, things have slowed down a bit. But we are getting traction on that, and I expect that we'll end up owning 60 to 70% of Crawford. With all the equity capital coming in, from other groups, and I think. We've had a number of smaller announcements since we last talked, but the fact that we have $4 million from the Canadian Minerals Infrastructure Fund. We had the press conference with the minister a couple of weeks ago. The key piece with this is that's $1.5 billion fund. This $4 million came out of one small tranche to do studies to build the infrastructure. Well, if we qualify to get the studies done to build the infrastructure, a portion of that money is to be spent on funding infrastructure.
Gotcha.
So, given the size of what's there, of $1.5 billion. So
there's maybe more for growth.
Yeah, so the 50 to 100, of that 300, maybe another 50 to 100 comes from the infrastructure fund.
Okay. So you're obviously a lot of things can go wrong, but a lot of things go right if you and you move forward. So if you solve for that $300 million, Crawford is done. And then what else is sort of outstanding in terms of environmental and?
Yeah. So the other big milestone since we last talked is we began filing the environmental impact statement. That should be done in the next 9 to 10 days.
Okay.
And so with the filing of the impact statement, that completes the second stage of the permitting process. And again, kudos to our team. We've got a great group of people who've been able to advance this project very rapidly. We are the only Canadian mining project to file an impact statement underneath the 2019 legislation on environmental permitting in Canada. So
what does that mean?
So we are the first only major scale project, and again, it's not huge. It's 5,000 tons a day that you need then kicked into the federal process.
Right.
We're the first mining company since 2019 to get to the second stage of the process. So it just shows you how few large-scale mining projects have been advancing in Canada, and we're first.
You're first mover advantage. What's that? Has anyone else? Is anyone else close behind you? I'm thinking all this money the government's making available, and if there's no one else in the queue, it's kind of like.
Yeah, there's in terms of in the nickel space, there's some very good projects,
right?
And there's some smaller scale ones that are coming to the market, but in terms of larger scale, nothing's close behind.
Okay, I'll get a pretty little bow, and we tie it up and hopefully move on. Yeah. So what's the timing on all of this? Because there's a few things which need to get done.
Yeah. So once the impact statement is filed, and they've got 10 days to say, did you review it? Once that's done, that's 365 days to come back with a yes/no answer. We expect. They've made lots of noises about going faster, and this third phase is the only phase that they can really go faster. So we expect to see an answer from the federal government by next summer, in a worst case, in September. Okay. And then we've teed up all the provincial permitting that we need to do. There's 6 different class EAs that we need to file, and we've been filing them. Yeah. We've teed those up so that they will be completed around the same time. So we're in a position to make with funding available, we can make a construction decision.
To make a construction decision, we assume you finish off and tidy up the kind of financing stack. Yeah. Between now and then, the financing decision is how you fund it. What about a build decision? How does that all work?
The build decision is next fall.
Next fall.
Yeah.
Done. Okay. Yeah. And the build period is what?
30 months. Yeah.
30 months. It's a big. Let's say 3 years to kind of some sort of production. So what point does I know industry is valuing this because it's big. Yeah. Right? You've got all the partners on board, or starting. Well, you've got a lot of partners on board. You'll probably have more partners on board. So they value it. Industry values it. But when's the market going to value this thing? What should they be looking to?
So, I mean, twofold. One, obviously nickel coming into favor, would be helpful. And again, I think we're in an inflection point. We talked about that on the nickel show.
Yeah.
Over the next 4 months. But then, in terms of the project, once we complete that second stage, and that permitting decision comes in line, that is a really, really big decision. And again, if you were a major looking to take somebody over, and they're almost there on permits, you would just wait until they get the permit before you started to make a move, right? So I think, and then the other piece is, we should have, the debt and equity package we're originally targeting the end of this year, but obviously with the election, that's kind of slowed everything down and people waiting to see what's going to happen. But, we want to get that done by the end of the first quarter so that we're basically well set and ready to go. When those permits come. And those discussions are continuing and going well. So,
okay. So 60%.
Yeah.
Of Crawford.
Yeah.
What are the economics look like?
So $2.5 billion US NPV.
Yeah.
So 60% of $2.5 billion is $1.5 billion US. So with the Canadian exchange rate, that's $2 billion divided by a couple hundred.
We discounted a little bit.
200 million shares, and
we discounted it a little bit.
Yeah.
Ways from where you are today.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a step change coming up.
Yes.
If you can hit all of these points through to FID.
Yep. And then the other piece, we've had, since we last talked, we put out a bunch of regional results, again, one release on 7 properties, another release on 5 properties.
Yeah.
And those resources will come through. So again, once we can show the Crawford works, again, we don't think, none of us on our team really think Crawford's the best deposit. We think some of the other ones that we're drilling will turn out to have even better economics. So then, we'll be able to, roll through with that multiplier in terms of Crawford. And then the other piece that was just last week was very exciting. We hit some high-grade material in our Bannockburn. So 4% nickel over 4 meters and 12 meters of 1.6 is pretty good. So we're doing the geophysics now to see exactly where this thing is sitting. We had a sort of broad target, we were drilling into and hit this stuff. And that's the thing that again, people... in terms of these big bulk tonnage, low grade, why? But one of the things about, one of the best ways to find a high grade deposit is to have a lot of nickel in place. So that, if you have in Crawford total endowment across all categories is 10 million tons, right? And even if just, 1% of that nickel end up getting remobilized and upgraded, that's 100,000 ton, nickel deposit. 2.5% got remobilized, that's a 250,000.
What's remobilized mean?
Means basically if you had fluids come through with some sulfur, they pull the nickel out and they move it somewhere else, and gets, to make a high grade deposit, you need a trap somewhere to get the high grade nickel to settle out. And so, having the kind of nickel endowment we have creates lots of opportunity for these high grade deposits to show up, and so we're quite happy to see that. We've got a bunch of other targets in the Bannockburn, off some of the Bannockburn structures we're also looking at. So fingers crossed that we'll have some more high grade intervals as well come through.
Okay, and obviously I saw those couple. I think it's a couple of press releases on Bannockburn. Some of the other projects. Where does Bannockburn sit in terms of the lineup?
Yeah, so there's a cluster. It's one of the dust cluster deposits down in the south. Yeah. So we got Midlothian, Bannockburn, Sothman, and Powell, and so those ones would be, I think, those are probably longer term, but they're a natural cluster on their own. We could JV or partner just on that cluster to itself. Right. The main one is Reed, right? We've been drilling. That's bigger than Crawford. We should have an initial resource out here before the end of the year. And then we've got our man targets that are just to the northeast of Crawford. Again, some potentially, larger than Crawford footprint type things that we're drilling off. So
it's exciting.
It's very exciting.
I mean, you've done this in quite a short time frame. I think that's again something I was hearing about yesterday. Is it too quick? Is it possible? Could it? Yeah, you've really kind of been through the phases quite quickly, proved this up, and Crawford is starting to, I think, be better understood. And lend potential to the rest of the portfolio. Well, great. Great update. I'm glad it's all going well. I look forward to getting more updates later this year. So do you want to, what are those things? What are we hearing about before the end of the year?
Yeah, so we'll have the complete the second phase of the permitting process. We'll look to have another resource out before year end. We'll have another 5 resources out or more in the first part of next year. Look to have a funding the funding partner in place, by the end of the first quarter. And then we've got our entire downstream business. We had another great announcement and board ad with Julian Ovens, former chief of staff with a bunch of senior ministers, ex-BHP, ex-Rio Tinto. Yeah.
That came back. I think the investors I spoke to yesterday, well informed, they put a lot of weight on that appointment because of what it showed. You don't attract people like that if you're some foxy little junior, right?
Yeah.
The intent is there and the opportunity's there, and I think they got that, as they should.
Oh no, and then the announcement we had with the downstream the quality of the people that we attracted there. I was just at a stainless steel conference down in Nashville with all the North American stainless alloy industry. We had a bunch of great meetings with a bunch of steel and alloy companies, who want chromium, which a mineral no one talks about, but they want chromium, they want nickel, they want iron, and a place to melt it where they can do it in a low carbon, potentially zero carbon way, which we're developing. And so again, we're getting great traction on that part of the business. And again, it's another key plank in terms of the overall portfolio.
Amazing. Good luck to you.
Thank you.